I find it significant that the miracle of the multiplication of community pantries in our country only in the last 10 days began in a street in Quezon City called MAGINHAWA. In today's Gospel for Good Shepherd Sunday, we hear an echo of the famous Psalm 23. Ang Panginoon ay aking pastol. The Lord is my shepherd. It portrays God as a shepherd who leads his flock so that they can feed in green pastures and refresh themselves beside restful waters. In short, the Good Shepherd desires nothing for his sheep except their ginhawa. Yun lang ang hangad ng mabuting pastol, ang mabigyan ng kaginhawaan ang kanyang kawan. The well-known theologian Dr. Jose de Mesa, who passed on just 10 days ago, challenged his theology students in Pampanga to find what he called a more enculturated term for salvation in Filipino. Kasi ang sabi niya, parang napaka-generic nung salitang kaligtasan. And it tends to be too otherworldly and too spiritualized. He wanted something closer to the Hebrew idea of salvation as well-being or fullness of life. Kaya he guided the discussion and was able to help the students sift through the many possible words or terms in Tagalog until they settled for Kanawan in Kapampangan, which is the equivalent of ginhawa in Tagalog. Tiningnan ko sa bokabularyo, sa diksyonaryo, and I found out na yung salitang ginhawa ay nakaugnay. It is closely related to the words hininga o paghinga. Ginhawa is literally about being in such a situation na nakakahinga ka ng maluwag, that you are able to breathe comfortably. Incidentally, the opposite of ginhawa is now turning out to be one of the serious symptoms of COVID infection. Difficulty in breathing, hindi makahinga ng maluwag, especially when the lungs begin to get coated with a thick mucus, phlegma, as they react to the virus that multiply very fast and cover the cells, the linings of the lung cells involved in the whole dynamics of breathing. Kaya hindi ka makahinga. Walang ginhawa. Itong nararanasan ng marami sa ating mga kababayan, both literally and metaphorically. And this should make you understand why the word ginhawa in Tagalog or maginhawa has become our metaphor for comfortable life. Ibig sabihin ng maginhawa, hindi naman yung sobrang hirap, hindi ka na makahinga, at hindi rin naman sobrang yaman na nasasakal ka na. It is neither a life of extreme deprivation nor a life of suffocating wealth and wanton luxury either. Yung bang tama lang, nakakahinga ka ng maluwag. You live comfortably when you are able to breathe well. Have we not heard of people who are suffocating in their wealth? Hindi naman lahat ng mayaman nakakahinga ng maluwag. People whose material possessions turn them into individualistic human beings, or break their families, or make their lives miserable. Kung ganoon ang maging mayaman, ewan ko lang kung gusto niyong yumaman. Because hindi pala lahat ng yaman ay nagbubunsod sa ginhawa. Perhaps we can paraphrase the rest of Psalm 23 this way. Even though we walk through the dark valley of this COVID-19 pandemic, we fear no evil, for you are with us. Your rod and your staff, they are not there to terrorize us, but to protect us and give us comfort. You set a community pantry shelf before us, to which we can give what we can and take what we need. It prospers to the great dismay of our enemies. You anoint our heads with oil, and the food that we are sharing continues to overflow. Of course, we know the many odds of the community pantries. We know, for example, that even the girl, Patreng, Ana Patricia noon, who started it all, was accused of being a wolf in sheep's clothing. Isang asong gubat daw na nagpapanggap na tupa. Actually, the accuser used a stronger biblical analogy worse than a wolf. He likened her to Satan. Satanas daw siya. Ironically, the accusation came from a military man whose job in the government is supposed to be that of a shepherd who protects the sheep from the wolves. Well, perhaps today's gospel can help us distinguish or discern between the two. Who of the two is the true shepherd and who is the real wolf? Who of the two is the instrument of God? And who is the instrument of Satan? Matalino rin naman tayo, di ba? This Sunday of the Good Shepherd gives us a simple criterion for discerning between one and the other. In the Gospel, Jesus does more than echoing Psalm 23 about the divine shepherd who leads his flock to green pastures and restful waters, meaning to a situation of kaginhawaan. Sabi ni Jesus, a good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired man, who is not a shepherd and whose sheep are not his own, sees a wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf catches and scatters them. This is because he works for pay and has no concern for the sheep. Yung isinulat ni Patreng on a cardboard, in all its simplicity, has struck a chord in the minds and hearts of Filipinos. Give what you can, take what you need. Magbigay ayon sa kakayahan, kumuha batay sa pangangailangan. It struck a chord. Kaya naging maugong. Bakit? Because it is a message that applies to all of us. Kasi we usually apply the giving only to the usual givers, namely the well-off donors or benefactor types. And we usually apply the taking only to the caricatured takers, the poor. But this slogan has made us think, has made us rethink this as a nation. It has made us realize how false the caricature is. Give what you can and take what you need applies to all of us. Because we are all potential givers and we are all potential takers. Even the poor are generous givers. In fact, they are often compensated so little for their contribution to production in society. The message of Maginhawa Street has simply qualified both the giving and the taking. It has led us to a self-criticism and an examination of conscience. How much in the world's pantry have we given? And how much have we taken? And take note, all of it is meant to be spontaneous and anonymous. Kaya please lang, wag nang magpa-epal. And let us not give so that we'll be known in the social media. Because it defeats the purpose. Nobody can make you give against your will. Just as nobody will prevent you from taking against your will as long as you abide by the qualification. Kasi may qualification. What do you give? Well, what you can. That is the qualification for the giving. What do you take? What you need. That is the qualification for the taking. What you need. Only what you need for the day. Pantawid. Tingnan natin. Give what you can. Who will determine that? Nobody but you. And that is why the message does not say, give what you want. Ang sinasabi niya, give what you can. Hindi yung ibigay ang gusto mo, kundi ibigay ang kaya mo. And often, what we want to give depends on what we feel like giving. And the motivation for wanting to give is usually the corresponding incentive. Namely, that we get something in exchange. It has a reward. Sabi ni Saint Ignatius sa kanyang prayer for generosity, Dearest Lord, teach us to be generous. Meaning, to give and not to count the cost. Not to expect a reward. No, it's not give what you want, but give what you can. There are times that we rise above our feelings to do something because we make an act of the will. Namely, to give, even when we do not feel like giving, because we have begun to believe in the value of it. It is already an act of the will. We don't want to surrender to helplessness. Ayaw na ayaw nating sabihin, wala na tayong magagawa. Just because the government cannot be relied upon to help us during these difficult times, does not mean that there is nothing else that we can do. Something inside us tells us, yes, we can help each other get by. Eh yung pangalawa, what about the second half? Take what you need. How come I say it applies to all of us? Nabanggit ko ito sa aking homily last week. And I believe it is what motivates more and more people to give generously. Take what you need. Kumuha ng batay sa pangangailangan. It applies not only to those who are lining up in our pantries. Like I said last week, ang buong daigdig is a community pantry. The whole world is a big community pantry prepared by God. If we are too comfortable while others are too miserable, shouldn't we ask ourselves, baka naman I have taken more than I need? Have I taken in such a way that others have ended up being deprived of their proper share? It is those who have sincerely confronted themselves with this question of conscience who are bound to make an act of the will. Maybe now is the time to also give what I can. Our givers at our community pantry are so generous. Sometimes the goods that they share are taken by more than 600 people in one day. Bigay ng isang tao, pakinabang ng 600 tao. Pero, the line continues to get longer. And it is not comfortable to stand in line. Ewan ko kung narinig ninyo si Father Philip kahapon, ang coordinator ng ating community pantry. Humawak na siya ng megaphone, nakikiusap, pleading with the people not to line up yet in the heat of the sun, because the elderly or the vulnerable might suffer from a stroke. At alam nating nangyari na ito sa isang community pantry. Kaya we open early in the morning, habang malamig-lamig pa, and late in the afternoon, kapag malamig-lamig na. Will there ever come a time when the line for the givers will be longer than the line for the takers? Darating kayang panahon na ang linya ng mga nagbibigay ay mas mahaba kaysa linya ng kumukuha. Maybe when that happens, that will be the signal that the kingdom of God has come. That the Good Shepherd has finally succeeded in leading all of us to true ginhawa. That the majority of us are neither so poor nor so wealthy as to both live in misery. That people learn to give, not just to make others maginhawa, but also to seek their own ginhawa. The Maginhawa Community Pantry is a good news, a gospel lesson on good shepherding, a lesson on the God within us who teaches us how to lead one another to the green pastures and to the refreshing waters of a less unjust society, of a more equitable society.